Well, hello, folks. Welcome to another morning of Miyagi. Yes, Miyagi Mornings, episode 161. We will begin the podcast recording portion soon. I'm just going to kind of hang out with you here for a few moments and let people come on board to the live streams and make sure, as always, that we're actually live streaming on all the platforms, because some of you are watching me on YouTube, but others will use alternative platforms such as Odyssey or Float. I cannot tell if we are actually live on Odyssey yet. Yes, we are. And we are live on Float. There I am with the freaky delay. Watching yourself with a freaky delay is kind of freaky. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about how to choose a new place to live. And this came from a question that I think was actually for me to answer by email. It did come to the same way that like all my questions for Miyagi Mornings and the podcast and everything come in. But I just got the feeling like this person wanted a kind of a brief emailed answer, and I can't do it. So I'll give you the actual question verbatim here in just a moment when we start. Like I said, the part that we record for the podcast recap on Fridays. But it's almost impossible to answer. And I think it'll make sense as to why. I'm also going to be doing something today. I'm going to use a question to answer a question. And I've found that to be very powerful. And today what you're going to learn is how to answer this question. Where do I go if you want to go somewhere for yourself? But you're also going to learn a sales technique, and a pretty damn good one, and a great decision-making technique, because good salespeople that are not out to like sell somebody some piece of shit car for twice what it's worth or something, like good salespeople that want lifelong relationships with their customers, what they're actually part of is a decision-making process, and they want to be proactive in it. And I'm going to use a way that I used to do this when I was selling network equipment and test equipment and stuff like that, that worked really beautifully, and it really helped a lot of my clients. So we're going to be doing that in just a moment. I'll give it a few more moments. Just say hey to folks as you're coming on. Lauren, Emily, Hayes, Josh, BC, Chris. I feel like, remember Romper Room? I see Debbie and Susie and Johnny and Jack, and you're sitting out there when you were a little kid, and you're like, she's talking about me. Just throws out a bunch of random names. But I have real names. I actually do see you guys here. And welcome to the feed. Let me see. We got anybody over here on? We got a few people on Odyssey, and we do have a few people on Float. Pretty good turnout, actually, on the alternative platforms. Let me just get where I can see that question so I read it properly. I don't like to read somebody's question and not get it right, because then the person's like, I didn't say that. All right, here we go. We're going to go ahead and get into the main body of the episode. Hi, folks. Jack Spirko here with episode 161 of the Miyagi Mornings podcast. And today we're going to talk about choosing a place to live, like finding a new place to call home. I recently did an episode on strategic relocation within the United States. And I pointed out that like one of the things that we really have going for us in the United States is the fact that as a republic, and I just want to say something about the word republic. There's a lot of people in this country that have a misunderstanding of what republic is. And we'll say, we're not a democracy, we're a republic, and go on and on. And republics aren't magic. Over 100 nations throughout the world are republics. But we truly are a republic of states. And that gives us quite a bit of sovereignty at the state level. Nowhere near as much as I think was intended, but quite a bit. And that's why life in Pennsylvania is different than life in Florida, and why life in Texas is different than life in California. It's not just geography. It's not just economy and what have you. There's literally things in some states that you can do and no one cares about. And there's things you can do in other states that make you a felon and will put you in prison. Something as innocuous as this little pocket knife I'm showing to the people in the live feed. This is a simple little, nothing special little knife. People might use it as an EDC knife. Nothing special about it. In Massachusetts, this is a felony. Carrying this in your pocket is a felony. In Texas, it's like, boy, you should have a better knife. I mean, really. Like, so there's this huge variance between our member states. So with that in mind, I did an episode on how you can make your life better just by choosing a new place to live. This has resulted in a rash of questions that are similar to this one. Not all of them invoking Texas, though, but very similar to this. This came in today. My wife and I listen to your podcast. We live in Atlanta and are looking to escape climbing property taxes and Georgia corruption. What is a nice area to move to in Texas that won't break the bank? And I definitely can't answer that in an email. There's no way. It's not possible. I can't do it even if I tried. And I don't think anybody else could either. Like, you could give somebody a few areas to check into or what have you, but I don't think you would really be doing them a service. And when I think about Texas, I think about, Texas is a state within a republic, but Texas itself was a republic. And Texas itself is still thought of by many people that live here as its own country, or at least sort of its own country. We actually fly the Texas flag on equal status with the American flag in Texas. We're the only state that does it. We definitely have a bent toward nationalism. But when I say it today, I don't mean it with any of that kind of ego-driven or even historically driven reality. I just mean that Texas is big enough and diverse enough that saying, where should I live in Texas is kind of like saying, well, where should I live in Argentina? Or where should I live in the United States? Damn near, not quite, but I mean, it's kind of like that. I mean, there's no big difference between Florida and Montana, even if you don't invoke government, right? So when we narrow down a state, to some degree, what we've done is we've defined for ourselves what our secondary government is going to be. And what I mean by that is you're going to have federal law, federal codes, et cetera, with federal supremacy anywhere within the United States that will apply to your life. And then states in general may do some pushing back, but mostly what they do is they add another layer of government onto you. And then within that state, you will find some tertiary governmental bodies like cities, counties, et cetera, that may add more, or some that don't add hardly any, so you have maximum freedom because the state doesn't bother with certain things. But overall, within that state, it's pretty similar from one place to the other, and the biggest variances are going to be very, very local ordinances or things like HOAs that interfere with your life. Otherwise, life in Texas is life in Texas to a degree. However, where do you want to live? And when I say that, I don't mean inside Texas or whatever. I mean like in general. Do you like desert climates? We've got that. Do you like more of like a rocky hill country climate, canyon climate? Yeah, we got that too. Do you like rocky, mountainous desert climates? We got that. Do you like piney woods, like Eastern style woods? We have that. Do you want coastal living? Do you want river living? Like the state is so massive. It actually has 2 time zones that it's in. And again, this is not ego. This is just geographic reality. If you take the southern tip of Texas to the northern tip of Texas, pull Texas out of the map and stick the southern tip of Texas on the northern tip of Texas, the top of Texas touches Canada. And it's just as big going across from Texarkana to El Paso. How can I possibly tell you where to live there? And I think this is true of other states. Like, I've spent a lot of time in Florida. I lived in Florida for a while. Jacksonville, Florida, and Fort Myers area are very, very different places. And Miami's very different as well, right? And then there's a whole piece of broken up pieces of rural Florida that are totally different. Like, and so this is the case everywhere. So what we really need to do is figure out, well, what do I want and how close do I get to it? So here's what's going to seem like a crazy, absolute crazy question. But it is the question that I used to use when I used to sell technology and computer networks. What's perfect in your mind? And I used to call it the magic wand question. And I would have a client where you're trying to help him design a network or a testing solution or whatever. And you'd have all these buts and we could, but, and, you know, and then you have like a group of people. You know, you get a conference table, you get like 5 people, they're husband and wife, might as well be 5 personalities when husbands and wife start trying to come to agreements. And it's the same scenario where like, but this and what that, stop it. Let's not worry about, but let's not worry about what's too expensive. Let's not worry about any of that. Let's get this whiteboard here. And if I gave you guys a magic wand and you could all have whatever you wanted, what would you all get? And it usually took a little prodding because they're like, hey, the sales guy's trying to get us to buy expensive shit. No, because if you don't have the budget, you don't have the budget. And that'll come into this as well with, if your dream house is 87 bedrooms and 5,000 acres and all, and you ain't got the budget, you ain't got the budget. Put it out there anyway. And once you got it flowing, once you got people like living the dream in their mind, they would come out and everybody would throw up everything that they wanted. And you keep them going until they run out of steam. They're like, no, that's it. That's everything. Then, okay, what up here do we know we can do? Let's start making another list. All the things we know we actually can do. What up here can we get close to? You make another list. What of these things are actually things that are requirements? Because one of the things with a network might be like compliance with the law so we don't go to jail. Okay, so that's a requirement. So that's a have to be. With your spouse, it might be, there's only so far I'm moving from my family. Right? So, and then other people might be, we'll go anywhere. So you got to find the have to's, the ones that you can get close to, the ones you can do. And then we're going to sanity check that against things like budget and other realities. Are you independently wealthy? And when I say that, I don't mean you're rich. You're not Richie Rich money bags. But I mean, when I say independently wealthy, you don't have to work for a living anymore. You have a lot more freedom than somebody has to have a job. What kind of job do you have? Can you work remote? If you can't work remote, now we got to start looking for places where there's employers that can employ a person like you and a job that you are willing to do for money that works for you. And once we do that, we start to form this picture. But it all starts, I can't emphasize enough how much it all begins with what would be perfect. What would be perfect? Somebody might say, I want a beach house. But it might, let's say the state you've picked is Tennessee. There ain't no beach houses in Tennessee. So, okay, then we have to ask ourselves, well, what about a beach house is what I want? Is it the lifestyle of living on the beach? Is it the ability to walk the beach? Is it the ocean itself? Is it a water view? Is it just something romantic in my mind? What is it? And if it's, what I really like is the wide open nature of an oceanfront and being able to walk for miles on a coastline. Maybe there's a lake or a river that does that for you. I don't know. And are you willing to settle for it? Well, if you're not, then we need to look at another state. And this is this decision-making process. And if you think about it, honest to God, if we were doing right by our children with public education, which is government school, wouldn't this kind of like be a course you would teach kids? This is how to figure out exactly where you want to live and how close you can get to it and how to get it. Isn't that more valuable than how to do some sort of complex inverse trigonometry-based calculus for a kid that's going to go be an accountant? And they might actually use it, right? Maybe. Accounting gets pretty advanced with mathematics, but usually not that kind. Right? The physicist needs that, not the freaking person that's going to go out and freaking do marketing for a multinational. And this is the kind of thing you have to do this for yourself, because no one will give you what I'm giving you right now. And I can't give you all of it in a 15, 20-minute segment. I can't do it. But that's where I think we all need to start is what is perfect. Then out of the perfect, what is actually not just perfect, but a necessary. And then out of the perfect, what is, man, I really want this. And then what's negotiable. And then we're going to start looking within our budget, because we're going to have a budget, right? And this is back to what I teach about real estate. Every buyer is a settler. Every buyer is a settler, period. I don't care if somebody says, well, what's your budget? $2.75 million. And I don't have a budget like that. I never have. I've never even looked at a house in real life that was over $1 million, let alone 2.7 million. But if I had 2.7 million, I'd have a vision in my head of everything that I wanted. And in the end, I'd settle. Every buyer will settle. Now, if you're selling a house, all that means is you find all the houses that are in the price range and area that your house is in. You make your house 1% better than everything else in the price range, you will sell your house that fast. I've done it in good markets, bad markets, sideways markets, leftways markets, rightways. It doesn't matter. If you're sitting in a position where your house shows 1% better than everything in your market at your price, you will sell that house as quick as that. Nobody will buy any of the other houses until your house is sold if you do that. But understanding that psychology and realizing that's what you're doing when you're a buyer. Instead of being emotionally driven in your decision about where to live, what kind of house to build, etc., because that's what happens in that settlement. You get locked in on an area, you look at everything, the bank says you can have this much money, you have this much of a down payment, and you look at things until you're exhausted, and then when one sticks out as being a little bit better, you buy that one. If you're selling, that's a good thing to know and trigger. But if you're buying, it's a good thing to know so that you're not triggered into making a bad decision, so that you can make a logically led decision about where you're going to live. So if I was moving to Texas for the first time, I would probably sit back and say, I want some land. So then I would look, one of my first things would be, where can I live where I can afford land? And what do I mean by land? I mean, if I'm going to go to my perfect, right, well, then I would have like 1,000 acres with a bunch of exotic game running around on it. Well, that doesn't pass my sanity check. I don't have the money to do that. So then land is, I want to be able to go outside in my backyard and not see my neighbors. Even with 3 acres, I've been able to do that here. For me, I want to be able to bring people here and conduct education. So the 2 big giant buildings, outbuildings on my property with electricity, power, insulation, etc., AV and all, that's great. So that ticked the box for me that you might not give 2 shits about. And that's why you have to start with this idea. What is perfect for me and how close can I get to it? So then you start to refine that. Okay, where are all the regions in this state that are in my price range to give me this potential? And the easiest way to do that is to just start looking at things. I need at least a 4-bedroom house. Go to Zillow or Realtor or whatever and start picking some places and just sanity check the price. And then don't fail to use things like Google Earth, Google Maps, whatever, the satellite view, so you can get that overhead view of the property, because that'll rule out a lot of stuff. It'll also rule in okay, that's right up against a freaking highway. They said highway access. I didn't know they meant highway easement in the backyard. I don't want that. It's too noisy. It's too dangerous, whatever. And then you start kind of refining that down. And then eventually you're going to have to start actually getting on the ground and going and looking. But the more research you can do that way, the more you can start to refine some areas. And then this is the difficult part of this. I'm moving to a new state. I don't have anybody there. I don't have a job offer, whatever, and I have total freedom. It's like trying to design a living room with no walls. You have no restrictions except this giant restriction, which is the state's borders. So that's what we're doing here. It's just like doing permaculture design. We're defining restrictions because once we start to put in restrictions, the design begins to shape itself. So the more places you can kind of rule out and rule in, then the other problem you get is like when we moved here. Okay, we need to be within an hour and 30 minutes of where Dorothy's dad was. That was one of our limitations. That was a have to. That was to get my wife on board with me. We ended up within 45 minutes, but we were willing to do up to an hour and a half. So that makes a circle. That's a big flipping circle. And that makes finding a house even harder because most people are looking in a neighborhood. So there's maybe 30 houses for sale. You can go look at 30 houses in 2 weeks. It's monotonous, but you can do it. When you have like 4 you've picked out, one's here, one's there, one's here, that's difficult. So then you got to start again using research to eliminate. When I was in sales, another thing that I did differently than a lot of salespeople was I eliminated prospects as quickly as possible. Most salespeople would kill themselves to get in the door with somebody. Now, if there's a strategic company that I know there's an opportunity in the company that's different, anybody I can get to talk to with a pulse that I can get to somebody else, fine. But when I would find somebody, a smaller company or whatever, and I wasn't sure if we had a fit, as quick as I could rule them out, I'm not wasting another second. Like they don't have the money, they don't have the need, whatever. I'm talking to the wrong person, and they can't help me get to the right person. I'm never calling you again. You'll stay in the database with a big freaking X, just in case I come across, oh, no, he's next, right? And that's how we have to do this with property. We have to X properties out. Like this is not going to work, so I'm not going to waste much time on it. I mean, the other thing is moving sucks. Like who looks forward to moving? I mean, you might look forward to the eventuality after you move, but the process of moving blows. Being a prepper and moving early sucks. I've done that a couple times. So we want to make sure that we make the right decision if we can. Now, I would also say one more thing I want to finish up with. That doesn't mean maybe you don't want to rent a place, kind of live in a place for a little while, get a feel for it, see what's what you really want before you commit all the way. The thumbnail today is a quote that basically says, when you move to a country, you learn really quick there's a big difference between being a tourist there and living there. I don't think that applies just to countries. That applies to states, cities, areas, etc. You can come down here to Texas as a tourist, and your experience will be totally different. In fact, I would say Texas might actually be the opposite of some places. You know, you go to some places as a tourist, and there's so much tourist stuff. You're like, wow, this is great. And then you realize, like, if you live here, it's not that big a deal. It's not a huge tourist destination, Texas, really. You know, I mean, we have, like, the Rio Grande and Big Bend National Park and stuff like that. But in general, like, Dallas it's like any other city. There's not a lot of things that people come to Dallas or Fort Worth or Austin to see. Just isn't. And so I think that you really need to try living somewhere, and you do need to try visiting first. I know there's like that quote's true, but we got to start somewhere. And I think moving to a place and having never stepped foot on it only makes sense if you're making a career move. I've plenty of people have come here. Where are you from? Philadelphia. Why'd you come here? I'm an engineer, and I got a great opportunity with Lockheed. I get it. I think if you're making this move for yourself, for your family, as a strategic lifestyle move, we need to put a little more thought into it. That's why I like what Free State Project's doing right now. Well, they have this Visit New Hampshire initiative. Basically take a vacation in New Hampshire, but actually meet some people. And so if you go visit a place, I think one of the things you really need to do is you need to don't go there as a tourist. You know, get an Airbnb in a neighborhood. Drive around, go to a park, take a walk, talk to some people, just talk to some random people. That's one good thing about coming here to Texas. 9 out of 10 people, if you say, hey, how you doing? You're going to have a conversation after that. I mean, there's places like that doesn't happen. Like where I was from in Pennsylvania, if you talk to somebody for more than a couple seconds, you probably knew them. People don't just open up and start talking to some random stranger in line at a store. And the more you're in a place where like everybody knows everybody, they really know they don't know you, right? When people came down here to visit me from where I grew up in Pennsylvania, the one day I had a friend with me, it was about to snow, one of the rare times it snows here, and I'm standing in a line. There's a lady in front of me in the line, and it was a long line because everybody's going to go buy milk and bread or whatever. And we talked for a good 15 minutes waiting in line. So she pays for her stuff and she leaves. I'm like, bye. She's like, bye. And my friend goes, well, how do you know her? I said, I never talked to that lady once in my life, and I'll probably never see her again. He couldn't even understand that. Like those cultural differences matter too. You know? So in the end, that's what I want you to do. If you're trying to find a new place, let's start with that dream list. And then we pare down the dream list. What comes out of there? It's a want. What can we get close to? What's a need or requirement? And then sanity check it against budget, and then start pulling off regions. And I'm sorry to the guy that wrote me the email. I can't just say, check out this area. But without having any of those answers, I really don't know. What does not break the bank mean? What does that mean you want to spend on a house? You're not happy with Georgia property taxes. Boy, there's places in Texas you really don't want to live with property taxes. And so, basically rural is better. Unincorporated is better, but maybe not. It's all up to you. With that, I will catch up with you guys tomorrow with another episode. Okay, I'm going to hang out with you guys in chat if anybody has anything else for me. I did see a comment go by. Don't see it now, but I did see it kind of stream by, and it was about expert shows. I'm trying to find it to make sure I have the question right, but there's a lot of comments in here. Basically, I think what the person was asking, I'm sorry, I can't find it, so I'm not addressing it to the individual that asked. But the question was like, do you still have expert shows on Fridays? No, I have expert shows on Thursdays. So that's a podcast, not these videos here. my audio podcast called the Survival Podcast. If you found this video, you can get there at a short link, tspc.co. I went to a 4-day work week finally, and that's part of why I do these video feeds every day. I take all these videos, and the audio portion I'm recording over here goes into a weekly recap and is available in an audio-only format for my 5th show of the week. Used to do my expert counsel on Friday. The expert counsel is now on Thursday. So if you want to hear the expert counsel shows, they come out on Thursday. They haven't gone anywhere. They just changed the timing. And there's the link in the scroll there for you. But there's your answer. Do you have a mandolin slicer you recommend? Well, Lauren, that is, let's feature that question. Lauren has asked a question that has absolutely nothing to do with today's video, but that's okay. You know, I don't do a lot with mandolins. My wife does stuff with the kids that we don't eat, and one is potato chips. And she recently bought a mandolin to do potato chips with, and she just bought like a cheap plastic white mandolin, and it seems to work fine. I don't have like a professional one to recommend. That one caught me. I didn't expect that. Here's another one. Daniel says, Jack, how would you quantify urban-rural fringe? That's a term that I've used a lot. And that term, the first time I heard it, was used by David Holmgren, who's a co-founder along with Bill Mollison of permaculture. And I think he's using it exactly the way I'm using it. And it's like one of those things that's kind of like what's indecent, you know it when you see it. I think urban-rural fringe kind of works like that. Like you can't really define it for somebody else, but you know what it looks like. So I consider myself perfectly situated on the urban-rural fringe in that if you go further away from the city, it's all rural and it's extremely rural and it's spaced out properties. And there's like, you got to go a long way till you get to another town, city, borough, whatever, that starts putting regulations back into your life. A long way. And yet, if I go down the road about a mile, I'm in HOA blue hair hell. And if I go just a little bit further, I'm in a pretty good sized town. And if I go just a little bit further, I'm in Fort Worth, you know, a big city. And what that does, especially for a homesteader that wants to monetize their efforts, is there's a reason that we can sell every duck egg that's laid that we don't eat for like, I think we've jacked our price up to like $12 a dozen for new customers now, $1 an egg. Well, the reason we can do that is there's over 6 million people just over there. Now, they're not all right there, but they're that whole metropolitan Dallas-Fort Worth area. And by the way, Dallas and Fort Worth are very different places, 18 miles apart, night and day, right? Dallas is yuppie central. Fort Worth is Old West Texas. Old West Texas yuppies on some level. But them yuppies are down there, and I can sell to them. But I can live my life with practically the same amount of freedom. Some guy in the middle of a mountain of Montana. In fact, I might have more freedom. Because that guy in the middle of a mountain in Montana, he might do it anyway and get away with it, but he probably doesn't even own his own water rights. Like a lot of places in the West, you think of as really remote, you know, and really free. And a person, it's illegal for them to catch the water off their roof and store it in a tank or put a pond in. I can do anything I want, but like next month, my wife and I are going to get in the cool Challenger and we're going to drive down to Grand Prairie. We're going to go to Aaron Lewis concert. And Friday, I'm going to take my my kids out, my son and my daughter-in-law out for their birthday to a really nice restaurant. And I don't have to drive, 87 towns over to get there. It's right there. And I love urban rural fringe, but I love it because of the compromise component to my life. If it was just me, I'd probably be in the middle of Montana or something like that, and I'd be catching my damn water and revenuers can go elsewhere and not bother me. But part of my have to is I got to be where my wife's family is. I've got and now I've got my grandkids in my life. I was younger when I used to think this way. My grandkids are here every day. That's a have to be for me. So urban rural fringe for me is a way to get the freedom I want from that remote property, be with my family, do the things that I need to do to have my family in my life, keep my wife happy, and yet still have freedom. that when the dog wants to go out in the middle of the night, I just open the door. You know, I mean, I love that. And I'm not worried about him digging a hole under the fence or whatever. The dog's got so much space, he's not going to go anywhere. That if I want to go out back and I've got a problem animal that needs to be popped, I can shoot it and the police don't come. If I want to build a structure, I don't have to go beg somebody. To me, that's what urban-rural fringe is where you have the maximum amount of freedom and space and affordability of land comparatively, but yet there is some urban center close enough that you can get the resources both that you want to take from it, but you also have the ability to sell into it. And that's very much the way that David explained that. And that's what I mean by it. I could take one or two more. Some comments on Odyssey, but I don't really see a question. If you have a question, use all caps. Let's check float. Some comments on the COVID themed show yesterday. That was fun. And it was, I think, a big bunch of reality for people. Anyway, I think I'll wrap up here. I really appreciate you guys that not just come for these feeds, but kind of hang out with me, I guess you'd say, for the after show or whatever. And I really do encourage you, if you're not happy, right? If you are not happy with where you live, then you should look for something that will make you happy. And even if you don't do it, don't fail to look, because you may decide, I'm not going to do it, but you'll feel more like it is also important that if you're not going to go somewhere else, then how do you make yourself as happy as you can where you are? George asks, what is your opinion on vacation areas to move to? I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that. I guess you mean places that people go on vacation, like places that are known as vacation getaways. I think that, honestly, thanks to the blessing and the curse that is Airbnb, if you're going to do that, you need like the vacation, non-vacation fringe. Because all the places that I know of that are like really great places to get away, especially in, like day trip distance from city centers, like one is up in Oklahoma, not very far from here, a little less than 3 hour drive for us. Dorothy and I go up there once in a while, called Broken Bow, Oklahoma. Beautiful place. You won't live anywhere near Broken Bow right now, though, if you don't want to like mortgage a kidney so you can buy a house, because Airbnb has pushed all the properties up so much ridiculous in price. Because if I can get $300 a night for a property and I can, and the mortgage on it amounts to $150 a night, I don't care how much I actually paid for the house. You should, but that's how those markets get driven. They get driven by, if I can cash flow the property, I can cash flow the property. So then you got to kind of step outside of that area. That's where I think you need to go. Joe says, look for areas on lakes. I think that would be a great idea if you can make that work. And that's another thing. Like lakefront property can be really expensive. It can actually be very inexpensive. It depends. Like, how far are you willing to drive? The thing about a lake is, unless there's a bridge across it, a place can only be a little bit away, but it can be a long ass drive, and that can lower the prices of property. There are definitely places on Lake Ouachita up near where we lived in Arkansas that were like multi-million-dollar homes. You could barely afford them, but you could get a place. Now, this is 15 years ago, but you could get a place that was, an acre on the lake, 3 or 4 bedroom house in decent shape, $200,000. So, I mean, I think there are some opportunities there. And one more, Justin Tucker. Do you know any ways to buy land with crypto, or would you have to cash out before buying land? The way you would buy land with crypto is you would find somebody who's selling land that says, yes, I will accept crypto. There's no real reason, other than maybe an ideological one, though, to do that, right? So if you're going to buy land or a house or something, this is not something that's going to between me, you, and a fence post. Buying real estate involves the state, whether we want it to or not. There's going to be a title company. There's going to be reporting for tax property. You're not going to hide this, right? So if I buy a piece of land, a house, or whatever from you, Justin, and I have Bitcoin, and you say, yes, I'll take Bitcoin. When I buy that house with Bitcoin, it is no different from a tax consequence. If I had taken that Bitcoin, sold it into dollars, and transferred it to my bank account and then paid you with it. Now, there are some DeFi options and things like that where you can leverage your crypto to borrow money to buy a house. That's way more than I can go into today. But if we're talking about a straight, I want to take this Bitcoin or this Ethereum or whatever, and I want to make it into property, and it's gone, and Justin now has my crypto, and I have Justin's house. There's zero difference tax wise. When you sell me the house and I buy it, the IRS views it as though I've traded it. So I have a basis, my cost of acquisition, and then whatever I spent it at, whatever it was valued at when I spent it, that delta becomes my tax consequence. One thing people do need to know, though, people are so afraid of that. For the average person, middle income, middle to upper middle class income, your tax on a capital gain, even short term, is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 24%, and you're only paying it on the gain. So don't be afraid to have to pay taxes on your crypto. I know none of us want to pay taxes, but there are things that you do that you pay the man, or the man puts you in Club Fed, or the man ruins your life, or the man ruins your life and puts you in Club Fed. Like, one of those are your three options. And so buying property is not something to try to hide from the IRS, nor is the source of funds used to buy the property. This is where you get your CPA and your tax attorney, and you come above board. So I don't think it really matters. And, gee, you know what I'm going to need to do, because we have a special child person here right now. I'm going to have somebody from this audience that comes to these things all the time be a freaking moderator and get rid of crap like just popped up in the chat. I'll see to that later. You guys take care. We'll catch you later.